I will stop sharing there and we will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Jessica. We're working feverishly in the chat. So I am going to come up to the top of our QA here and say if a public charter school has non-unionized certified staff, can that non-union certified staff elect to participate in CTPFML?
Michael, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, sorry. My video's been disabled, but I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So, unionization does allow is the only way that people can participate if they're currently certified and working for a public school operator, which charter schools are considered public school operators. Um, Non-union certified staff, I think Jess, you mentioned this. Non-union certified staff can only come in if there is some union that does negotiate. So sort of when a union negotiates, then that union plus all non-union employees come in for that employer. So for non-union certified staff, really the only way they're able to participate is if there's some other unionized staff who elect to participate. Does that make sense?
We have a response here from Rebecca Goldberg, Michael. She was responding to your answer to the DSAP question. The DSAP program is when approval is granted for a position normally requiring certification to be filled by someone who is not yet certified because it's a shortage area. So under this law, would this be viewed as requiring certification because it is normally required, or not requiring certification because it's being filled by someone who does not have a certification due to a shortage?
Great question, Rebecca. As you can tell, I'm far from an expert on education law. I don't want to answer that question and give you a bad answer. Do you mind if I take that back and do a little bit of research?
That would be great. Rebecca, if you could privately send us your email in the chat, that would be great. How are seasonal temporary, oh, sorry, I just lost my question here. How are seasonal temporary staff treated? For example, coaches, sub teachers, summer help for 4 to 6 week periods at a time.
Um, for There's no exclusions, no specific exclusion for seasonal or temporary staff. I think someone else asked about some other categories that are in similar veins. There's no specific exclusion, so really we go back to what is the underlying eligibility. So for schools, if they're in a position that does not require certification, they will be eligible, assuming they, meet the other requirements for eligibility, currently employed and have earned at least 23.25 in the base period.
Thank you, Michael. All right, for CBUs, can a public school operator choose to include them without requiring the opt-in negotiation?
Um, so collective bargaining units, I assume, is what I mean by CBUs. If they're in a position that does not require certification, then they're going to be in regardless of opting in. If they are in a position that requires certification, then they would need to opt in. And Jess messaged me, and I should have mentioned this before. There also is the possibility, I don't know if this is in the presentation because I was answering the questions, but we do have the public program that most employers are part of. We also have an option for private plans. Um, Private plans is a whole application process, a vote. There's a whole, details around how you get a private plan approved. We can go into that in more detail, or you can check out our website for more information on that. If you go with a private plan option, you can expand that coverage beyond what the public program requires, both in the amount of benefits you're providing, as well as potentially increasing the number of people who are covered by it. So that would be, I guess, an alternate method for folks who are in a certified position and therefore not covered by a program to become covered because you're offering those sort of greater benefits via a private plan.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to skim through. We have a lot of questions to cover, so I'm just going to try to pick a few. Are employees required to use their first 40 hours of CT paid sick leave before they are allowed to use other types of sick leave? I know we've gotten similar questions like this today.
As far as Connecticut paid leave is concerned, we do not have a requirement that occur. However, there may be other things to consider. such as if there's a collective bargaining agreement that requires, use of the employee's own time. Sometimes this is not directly on the question, but if you have a short-term disability policy, they may have rules about, in order to get the benefits, what other steps you need to take, including applying for Connecticut paid leave. But at least as far as the paid leave authority is concerned, we do not require we do not require an employee to use any other um, accrued time.
Okay. If the worker is being paid for their military services and the employer has a generous policy to fill the wage difference gaps, can employees double dip and take CT paid leave as well?
Generally, military service, the employee themselves taking military leave, would not be covered by our program. Where military comes in is typically the relative of the person who's going out on providing military service. Um, so I think I might need to know if there's more details about that, if they're getting paid by the employer for, you know, um, because I'll just use an example. So because your spouse is going to serve overseas, you need to get your will in order, and you need to take time off in order to visit with an attorney to do that. You need to arrange childcare due to that service. You, as the spouse of the person going on leave, can potentially apply for benefits, but if you're the person who's actually going and serving, that's not a current trigger for Connecticut paid leave.
Thank you. Let's see. What if a person's certification status expires? Are they included in the program at that point?
Um, so I guess if they lose their job, if the position requires certification and they lose that certification, they're no longer considered employed. There is a limited window of time
When I
where
learned about CT paid leave,
um, there's a limited window of time, 12 weeks after they are no longer employed in a position where that. Well, I'm sorry, this would be require certification. I take that back. I was looking at it backwards. Um, if they require certification, they wouldn't be covered. So this would be a situation where they're still employed, but they no longer require certification for that position.
Tamara, it might be helpful to have a little more context regarding your question. If you could resubmit, that would be great.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I understand. That's why I asked you to answer it. We're learning about this as we go too, folks, so bear with us. So non-union employees are required to have a certification. Sean, could you clarify that question for us, please? Can we submit payments bi-weekly like our state tax, or does it have to be paid quarterly?
Yes, you can pay us the same way that you pay your employees. If you have a bi-weekly schedule, a semi-monthly schedule, a weekly schedule, we can accept those contributions on that schedule as well. It is our experience that most employers, particularly ones who have a payroll TPA, end up just giving us the lump sum at the end of the quarter. But either one is available.
Thank you. Can an employee utilize their sick leave and CT paid leave? How would both agencies know the other benefit is being utilized? So we actually ask you to plug in any PTO that the staff member is going to be using prior to their leave on the employment verification form, or any funds that they're going to be receiving that would be in addition to, so that the employee cannot receive more than 100% of their income. Can a non-union, non-certified staff member elect to not participate?
No, there's currently no mechanism to opt out for any employees. The only options are those folks who opt in, potentially having that expire and opting out. But because they're by default included, there is no opt-out mechanism.
Thank you. If an employee who does not work in the summer but is approved, let's say in April, will their payments end in the summertime?
Generally, yes. If they're no longer expected to work, this applies across the board to any employees. We will not pay benefits to individuals who are not expected to work for that week. But obviously, I know there's some employees who maybe have summer jobs. And so if they have employment related to that summer job, it is possible their payments would continue from us. But if their sole employment is with the school and they're no longer expected to work during the summer, we would stop the payments until potentially the school year starts if they still have that condition requiring leave.
Okay. What if the leave is intermittent and earns PTO time as they go? How will you know when they will be paid and not paid for the intermittent days they are taking throughout the year?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's something we struggle with for all employers. Our hope is that, and we try to work with the claimant. It's a pretty rare situation, but it does occur. We do ask that the claimant, if they're going to use their PTO, they don't apply to us for the same period of time that they do. We do have a way of sharing details about the claim, the dates of leave, as well as the claim payments that we make that employers can access. So if they happen to see someone using PTO and getting paid 100% of their wages and also got paid by us the same day, if they could let us know that, because that would be an overpayment.
Thank you. What if staff are hired in the summer assignment outside of their primary job terms? Do they contribute during that limited employment period as well?
If it's with the same employer and they're just changing their job responsibilities temporarily, we would go based on what their primary employment is with that employer. So if they're primarily in a position that requires certification and it's the same employer, we would consider them to be in a position requiring certification.
Thank you. October 1st falls on the 7th day of the payroll cycle. Is the expectation that we need to break out the wages and apply the contribution rate to 3 days of wages?
No, our position is that the contribution applies to any wages paid from October 1st or onward, even if some period of that time involves work performed prior to October 1st. So if the payment happens 10/1 or later, then it would be subject to the contributions.
Thank you. Okay, so just skimming through here. Our policy is to utilize and exhaust their time off while on FMLA. So do we have to change this process for non-certified staff or staff going out on Connecticut paid leave to keep their 2 weeks of time off reserved as requested? So
There,
yes, you do have to allow your staff to keep up to 2 weeks of their PTO. You cannot require them to exhaust all of their PTO.
okay, yes, yeah, I agree with you, Amber.
If a 10-month employee takes a temporary summer position with the same PSO, does the deduction continue?
So I think this sort of goes back to the earlier question about primary job versus a secondary job. If they're truly still employed in that primary position and that is in a certified position, we would consider them exempt, even if they're doing other work that would not require certification. If they're truly changing jobs, they're not going to be coming back in the fall to go back to the certified position, then we would consider them to no longer be in a position that's certified.
Thank you. So I want to circle back to Tamara. Bear with me for just a second. I just want to reiterate the original question and then piggyback onto that with the clarifying language. Let's see here. Bear with me for just a second, Tamara. So she had asked, what if a person's certification status expires? Are they in at that point? And then to clarify, she had said the position requires that they have a certification, but they lose their certification. Should they be included in the non-certified classification?
It may depend on the details, but just based on that information, I would say no. Their positions still require certification, and therefore everything's based on what the position requires, not necessarily what the individual employee might have. So I'm leaning toward it not making a difference that they lost it temporarily, I'm assuming, but I don't know the details. I don't know the specifics about when this may occur. But as I said, it's sort of based on the position itself rather than that individual certification status.
Thank you. Okay, let's see here. If non-certified employees are on a 12-week federal leave before 10/1 and then apply for CT-FMLA, will they get a full 12 weeks of CT-FMLA tacked onto the federal?
I love this question only because I literally just talked with DOL to confirm that this is true. So thank you for the timing on this question. Like all things FMLA related, I always rely on the Department of Labor. They officially oversee that program. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap with Connecticut paid leave, but I did confirm with them that yes, if someone if you is working for an employer that's covered by federal FMLA prior to 10/1 and took leave during that period of time, they would get a new allotment of Connecticut FMLA time beginning on 10/1. So in theory, if the timing worked out perfectly, someone could end up having, I think, 26 weeks of leave off in a row if it happens to be pregnancy where they get those 2 additional weeks.
Thank you, Michael. I think that also answers Carrie's question as well. So we have a lot of questions saying, can the federal and the CT FMLA run concurrently? If the leave reason qualifies for both federal and Connecticut FMLA, yes, you can run the leaves concurrently. But to reiterate what Michael was just saying, if the leave reason, say they are taking leave that does not qualify under related by affinity, which Connecticut FMLA covers, then they would not be eligible for federal FMLA. But say they have another leave reason later on in the year that's still in that covered 12-week period, yes, they can still use their federal FMLA for another qualifying leave reason. All right, so I'm going to scroll down here. We've got a few new ones. Follow up on the work that is performed in the summer. We have paraeducators that work during the school year and will be subject to the withholding. Some of the paraeducators work in the summer in our extended school year program. Would we withhold from those wages?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, both positions that those paraeducators are in do not require certification, and therefore they would be part of the program, for both situations, and therefore contributions would apply.
Okay. Now, what if a certified employee does extra duty work that does not require a certification, like a club advisor or homework club, etc.? Would they be included in this?
So long as the other duties are with the same employer, the same school system or Board of Education, then we would not look at those sort of supplementary activities. We're really looking at the primary position that they have with the employer and whether that requires certification.
Thank you. Okay. When this is originally rolled out, employees could not make a claim to Connecticut paid leave until after 1 year of contributions. Is there any wait period for staff once this goes into effect on 10/1?
No, the claimants could file on 10/1, the first day that they potentially owe contributions for this group. You're absolutely right. In the past, there was a year where people were contributing but not able to file for benefits. As far as this population of newly covered individuals is concerned, the coverage and the contributions start on the same day.
Thank you. So the question here is the total amount of time for Connecticut FMLA 16 weeks, and can they not take more than that? So the Connecticut FMLA is actually 12 weeks, and that went into effect in 2022. Is that correct,
Yes,
Michael? 2022?
2022.
Thank you. So no, they would not be able to get any more than the 12 weeks of the Connecticut FMLA unless it was for like military caregiver leave. Is it caregiver leave? I believe it's 26 weeks.
Yes, that's up to 26 weeks, but only for
Thank you.
FMLA. Paid leave does not cover 26 weeks.
Correct.
And the only other exception would be that incapacitation during pregnancy, which could entitle them to the additional 2 weeks during the pregnancy.
Okay. Have the number of hours changed for eligibility for paraeducators? For FMLA, it's 950. It's now 1,250.
So this would be the hours before you're eligible for FMLA. As far as I know, there's no difference. I mean, sorry, the difference about the number of amount of time is just in whether it needs to be consecutive. There was a carve out for public school employees that it doesn't have to be consecutive, while other employees it does. So I'm not certain about the 950 versus 1250 as far as the number of hours.
Thank you. We have an employee who is 50% under a required certification and 50% on a non-required certification, which would prevail. I would say whatever the job description is for that role. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes, although if it's sort of two different jobs that they're doing, I would try to come to an agreement with that employee as to which one is their primary responsibility. We would likely base it on, or we would ask you to base it on the amount of time they're spending versus, amount of income they're receiving, to determine the primary. If it's exactly 50%, Yeah, I'll put it this way. We'll ask the employer to confirm whether they're in a position that requires certification or not, and that's the primary position. We're not going to sort of dive too deeply into exactly how much time they're spending in each role. But I would encourage you sort of work with your legal counsel, work with the employee, and determine which is the primary position.
We have one that says, I was reviewing chapter 166 and it looks like certification only applies to teachers and administrators. What constitutes certification and what about nurses?
That is absolutely correct that the certification in Chapter 166, which is the certification we talked about here, is really about the education component. Obviously, healthcare providers are certified in other ways, but that's not applicable here. I think I answered some other folks' question, had a similar one about nurses specifically. It is our understanding that the majority of nurses in schools are not certified. However, I believe some may be doing educational components, particularly if there's sort of it's a school that is sort of focused on that, on healthcare. So if the position itself does require certification under 166, then it would apply. If you have a specific unique situation for your particular nurse, please reach out to the Department of Education to determine whether they require certification or not.
Thank you. If an employee is out on continuous leave, if they cannot receive 100% pay and they would receive CT FMLA and CT paid leave benefits, would they enter in their PTO? How would the employer know that? So when an employee applies to Connecticut paid leave, we will let you know what the decision of their claim was and what their benefit amount would be. This is actually a good one. I haven't heard this one in a while. It's one that we've heard before, but we haven't heard it in a while. When an employee is eligible for both federal and Connecticut, which paperwork does the employer fill out?
So this is, I mean, if we're talking about FMLA, actually, I'll take it.
We are.
Paid leave, we will accept basically any paperwork that gives us the information we need, whether it's federal paperwork, Connecticut paperwork for FMLA, or our own forms that we use. As long as it has the details we need, we will approve it. Obviously, work with your own legal counsel. I think it probably should be the same for Connecticut versus federal FMLA. If you have the information you need that is necessary to approve the leave, I would approve it regardless of the title on the form.
Thank you. So we're at 12:01 and I just want to be mindful of everybody's time and lunch hours. I do have two more questions here that I think kind of tie in. So we will ask these and then we will conclude. But I just want to remind everybody, we are going to take the unanswered questions back with us, get those answered, and we will collect all of the questions that we have answered and clarify anything and get copies of these sent out to you within the next week or so. So right now, it's our school nurses are provided through the town VNA. They are not school employees. Are they excluded?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Our school nurses are provided through the town VNA. They are not school employees. Are they excluded?
Okay. So I'm assuming that town VNA means that they're maybe municipal employees. If so, municipal employees actually fit in the category that schools used to fall into, where municipalities were not covered. However, they could opt in via collective bargaining agreement. Now for schools, it's for certified that still applies, but for non-certified, then they are covered. So assuming these nurses are considered municipal employees, then they would not be covered unless they elected to negotiate to participate via collective bargaining agreement, or some other union for that employer negotiates inclusion if they're non-unionized.
Thank you. And what about occupational therapists and psychologists?
As far as whether that requires certification, I'm not certain. I believe it does not, but I would check with the Connecticut Department of Education as to whether those positions require certification. And then obviously the ripple effects to the program is if it requires certification, they're not covered. If it doesn't require certification, they are covered by our program.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. All right, we are at 12:03, so we're going to conclude the webinar for today. I know we do have some unanswered questions. Our apologies, but we do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Please keep in mind, we're going to be holding a whole series of these webinars. We will also be having some webinars for private schools. And then later into the end of summer and early fall, we'll be holding webinars for workers of the public and private schools. Please do visit our website for more information. We're at ctpaidleave.org. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We appreciate it. Michael, Jess, do you have anything to add?
Other than thanking everyone for attending and for the questions, we do really appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll make sure we get you all copies of the slides as well. We'll be running a report and we're going to try to send everything all together. So please just be patient and we will get those out to you. Thank you. Have a great day.